Just saying the words Legend of Zelda is likely to evoke certain concepts in your mind. If you're a newer fan, it's likely to bring to mind sweeping vistas and hours of exploration. If you're older, it likely evokes thoughts of solving complicated yet satisfying dungeons to face a fearsome foe at the end. The Legend of Zelda series truly has some incredible bosses, and I think I want to go game by game and sort them from best to worst. For this first episode, we're focusing on the NES classic Legend of Zelda. The original Legend of Zelda isn't really well known for its bosses, and while the thought of the bosses themselves might not seem to be interesting enough for its own video, there is some merit to be found in taking a look. Legend of Zelda for the NES features the debut of many monsters who would go on to have countless reappearances. Some of them were fantastic from the get-go, whereas others were actually quite awful, and certainly got better with some reimagining. Quick note, for these videos, I'll be going off the bosses listed in the Gamepedia Zelda wiki. A lot of the games have enemies that tiptoe the line between boss and not, so to end any arguments before they start, I'll be relying on their lists. So before we get started, I just wanted to mention that I started a Discord server. The server is fresh, we're still small, but I have high hopes. If you want to chat with me, talk about Zelda, give me video ideas, or just join a community at the ground level, you'll be able to find the invite as the first link in the description below. Without further ado, let's take a look at the bosses of Legend of Zelda, ranked worst to best. Number 7. Dodongo. I know, it's kind of hard to see. The Dodongo, as well as the more specific King Dodongo, would go on to become an absolute fan favorite in terms of repeat offender bosses, and I have as much love for King Dodongo as the rest of you likely do. But this isn't King Dodongo at all. It's just one regular Dodongo, and an underwhelming one at that. A recurring motif you'll see in this video is that I have a lot of affection towards bosses in this game that established concepts we'll see well into the other games. And Dodongo absolutely does that. You defeat him by feeding him bombs, just like the Dodongos of the future, and that is very nostalgic. But other than that, he just kind of exists. He isn't a boss so much as he is just a presence in the room you have to butcher before you can go forward. I mean, look at this. It's really sad. They make perfectly acceptable standard enemies later in the game, especially when found in large numbers. But as the boss of Temple 2, he's absolutely abysmal. Number 6. Dagger. Dagger is similarly pretty garbage. He gets a higher ranking than Dodongo because at least there is some level of actual threat to the battle, even if it's mostly from stage hazards as opposed to Dagger himself. Plus, his official art kinda looks like a beholder, and I like that. And I suppose it is kinda neat that you have to beat him by playing the flute, but after that, you hit him 2 or 3 times and he's done. The Dagger in Oracle of Seasons, much cooler. This guy sucks. Number 5. Aqua Mantis. The first boss I don't hate. Aqua Mantis is sort of the classic NES Legend of Zelda boss monster, and he's likely the first one to come to most people's minds when thinking about it, possibly because he's the only one many people actually got to before quitting. And I'm quite fond of him. He has a great design. He's kind of boring and quite easy, although this is pretty excusable as he's the first boss of the game. His appearance in Dungeon 7 is pretty inexcusable, especially seeing as you can kill him in like 7 seconds with the wand. But overall, Aqua Mantis is an upstanding chap, and deserves his place as the first boss I actually like. Number 4. Goma. Goma. Look, Aqua Mantis is probably a better boss than Goma, but I have a massive soft spot for Goma, who is my favorite reoccurring boss. And since this is a list that reeks of my own bias, she goes above Aqua Mantis. This fight is cool because it lays Goma's foundations for future games to build on, that being attacking her eye with a projectile. Goma isn't a passive cakewalk in the same way that the last 3 are, but she definitely is a bit too easy, especially Red Goma, who dies in 1 hit. Blue Goma is a much more enjoyable fight. Number 3. Ganon. How scandalous am I, placing Ganon so far from the top? Look, Ganon should in theory be a very cool fight. I love everything about the Ganon fight except for the fight itself. Look, his disappearing mechanic is a cool concept, but the game's finicky controls and the tiny hitbox of your sword essentially means you're wandering around the room swinging and hoping for the best. I know there is some rhythm to his moves, and exploits can be performed, However, on a regular playthrough, it's just an exercise in frustration. On top of that, it is such a letdown that at the end of the game, which focuses so heavily on creativity and problem solving, with an inventory of cool items, the only way you can hurt Ganon is by wandering around stabbing your sword. It would have been so cool if the flame lit the room up temporarily, or using bombs could help you cover a wider area. That must seem like a lot of complaining for a guy who's my third favorite boss, but I'm just so fond of everything else. He's the only boss with a decently unique looking boss room, which is awesome, and the introduction of needing a special arrow to finish him off is thematic in a way that really resonates with me. I love his design and color palette as well, and as unenjoyable as the challenge is, he's kind of the only boss who actually has any sort of challenge. So while I do have very real problems with him, what I do like, I like enough that he still ends up in the top 3. Number 2. Gleeok. I am tremendously fond of Gleeok. In every way, he's just a better version of Aqua Mantis. Both bosses are dragons that stand in one place, spit flames at you, and need to be smacked while weaving in and out of threat ranges. Whereas Aqua Mantis can be annihilated pretty immediately, Gleeok has a process to him. Each head needs to be destroyed independently, and as a head is destroyed, it becomes a permanent part of the threat radius as it begins bouncing around the room. Although Gleeok ultimately is pretty easy, the rhythm of entering the threat range, getting a hit or two in, and exiting, all the while dodging heads bouncing around the room, sees to it that the battle is always pretty tense, even if it is easy. I have a huge thing for multi-headed dragons, so he's also my favorite boss design in the game. Really, one would think that he would be my favorite one, but he isn't. Number 1. Manhandla. Manhandla is a boss ahead of his time, truly. He's the only boss battle in this game I would describe as mechanically rich. The standard fight itself is fun enough, as Manhandla bounces around the room attempting to pinch you, but it's the freedom to defeat Manhandla however you want that is so impressive. All that matters is the 4 heads or pincers need to be defeated somehow, and how it's done is pretty much up to you. Most bosses are resistant to the majority of items and weak to 1, maybe 2, but Manhandla not so much. He can be defeated 4 ways. You can destroy each head with a sword, which is perfectly enjoyable, or you can attempt to pick off each head with a bow at a distance. If you got it early, you can use the magical rod to do some real work. But the most rewarding way to kill him is with bombs. A well-placed bomb can absolutely devastate Manhandla, wiping out multiple or potentially even all of his heads. However, the more heads one wishes to destroy, the closer to harm's way they must put themselves to lay the bomb. Mechanically, Manhandla is a joy, and it's the only boss I'm happy to fight over and over again. Might be a unique pick, but I just think Manhandla is a fantastic boss. And there we go. The Legend of Zelda bosses, worst to best. Dodongo can get dumped in the trash, and Manhandla gets a gold medal pinned to its, chest? Blob? Whatever you want to call it. So what did you think of my rankings? Do you have sympathy for Dodongo? Think I'm overappreciating Manhandla? Or I'm just being a scrub about Ganon that needs to get good? Let me know down in the comments, along with your own listing. I hope you enjoyed this. Expect another one focused on the bosses of Adventure of Link to come out at some point in the near future. If you liked this, please consider subscribing so we can hit that glorious 2K subscriber mark. Thanks for watching, and as always, be careful out there. I hear Dodongo and Manhandla are wandering about. Keep your distance from their toothy maws and stay safe. It's dangerous to go alone.